The first topic is around how you view automation. What is, it's the most common used word, at least, you will find companies talking about that they are investing in it. What is automation for a product company like yours, Jennifer?
Sure. So first, I agree. It's great to see live people in 3D. It's also really warm up here. If it
Yeah.
so automation. So if I could take a step back and say, what does Interos do? So we are literally solving one of the world's hardest problems right now, which is focusing on transparency in the global supply chain. And so what's happened that we've all just lived through in the last 2.5 years is that every company in the world got very swiftly educated how connected they were to each other. Mm-hmm. And they also realized very, very quickly that the way they had been looking at risk in their supply chain was manual, right? It was with people. It was with, you think about when you onboard a new supplier or vendor, you Google, right? You look it up and say, oh, is that good or bad? Well, whether it's a ship going sideways in a canal, whether it's the unfortunate situation with the Ukraine, Russia, and the 3,000 global sanctions against Russia, and no one knows if they're doing business with Russia or not. So when you think about this digital transformation, there has been a swift uptick in our industry because CEOs and boards are realizing that understanding risk and the transparency in their supply chain is tied to their bottom line. And so when you think about, to answer your question to me, if I think about digital transformation, it was literally no choice. There has been such a rush the last 2.5 years to get out of manual, to get people out of it, because the goodness of artificial intelligence in our world is that there's no lag time. We need to know at a moment's notice if we're going to be interrupted because it's our brand and our reputation and it's our business bottom line. And so that's what it means to us.
Great. Datta?
How many of you know what Boeing does? So honestly, I think many of you know that Boeing is just a commercial aircraft company, but we actually do a lot more than that. We say we operate anywhere from seabed all the way to space. So as a part of defense, we do commercial aircraft, cargo planes, definitely that is the normal one, but also in defense, we make fighter jets and helicopters and surveillance planes. In the space, we have the Starliner. You must have seen a lot in the news, space shuttle, but we also make rockets and different satellites. But we also have autonomous unmanned division. I'm actually part of that division. And in autonomous unmanned division, we make autonomous several autonomous vehicles. Our autonomous unmanned submarine, which is XL UUV, then autonomous unmanned refueling jet, which is MQ-25. One of the subsidiary institute, they make a Scan Eagle, which is autonomous unmanned drone. And Liquid Robotics, which is another subsidiary, we make autonomous unmanned ocean robot that powers on solar and waves. And it actually, we got in 2011, we got a Guinness record for crossing the Pacific, right? So we have a long history of automation. If you look at, also in addition, we also have flying taxi. That is one more area where we actually, urban mobility, that is one more area we are doing a lot of work in. So if you look at, automation is not new. It has been there for a long period of time. Just you look at airline industry, autopilot, it has been there for last 6 decades, right? Mm-hmm. That is what is it is automation of all different control systems, right? When I talk about in today's scenario, right, I'll take an example of Wave Glider, which is an autonomous ocean robot. So it is doing a lot of missions in it has got so many different sensors. It is doing so many different missions in the ocean. And say for example, right, so this vehicle powers on solar and waves. That means you don't need any external power. That means it can be in the ocean for a longer period of time, right? So we really capture so much data from different sensors and really understand the health of this vehicle, when we need to maintain it, when we need to call this vehicle home, right? All that predictive maintenance, we actually talk about it, right? So that we actually do it as a part of this one. So look, I'll take a second example on the same vehicle. It is going from point A to point B, right? So ocean, you are going to have obstacles, you're going to have ships, right? So, and since it is an unmanned device, it actually gets data from different sources. It will get data from weather, it will get data from maritime traffic data about ships and everything which are going in that area. And it will basically, make a decision. Hey, there is an obstacle, I need to basically change my path, right? There's a ship which is coming around, there is a collision may happen, so I need to basically, avoid that collision and actually change the path, right? So all that autonomous decisions it is making it, right? That is one part of what I talk about automations. How do you basically make these automated decisions about
I do want to come back to, what has changed with AI, because there is so much, emphasis on AI, machine learning, deep learning. You can throw in more some of these technologies are making a difference in terms of the product kind of timeline to production and how quickly you can implement recommendation systems. So maybe you can talk I know Boeing has a history and they've been doing these things for years, but what has changed because of COVID, and what is that you are leveraging in terms of this advancements in AI, machine learning, deep learning?
Sure. I think automation was always forefront of us. We have been doing it for a very long period of time. So I'll take one example. When this wave glider, I'll take the same example again, right? This is autonomous ocean robot. When we actually got a Guinness record in 2011, we sent 4 of these devices from San Francisco and it went all the way to Sydney, Australia, right? So when we crossed the Pacific, there used to be a pilot who is actually navigating these vehicles. We had all these IoT devices that time also. We are getting a lot of data, but somebody is manually piloting these vehicles, and if there is a shipping data, they are actually manually moving around, right? Now, it's very difficult at that time to basically read that manual data and really interpret what it is as a human, right? Because we are capturing huge amount of data. What we are doing it as a part of it now is at least with the machine learning and with all the algorithms, those are getting matured, we are actually learning that data quite well, and actually using AI, we are able to take actions, right? So now I think there is no pilot behind the vehicle. The vehicle is going on its own. You just set the coordinates and it is going on its own, right? That is one area. Second area is also you talk about AI ops, which is operations, end user services. Now employees are not in the office. They are actually remote, right? Mm-hmm. So somebody have some issues or somebody have any challenges. How do you address those challenges? There's no help desk to walk around over there. So we are automating a lot of those processes, right, by using AI, because we always have a knowledge base. We always had a data, but we never actually took time or never put effort on it to basically change it. And that's what we are actually doing it now.
Great. And Jennifer, I mean, yours is a relatively new company. It really kind of came about during the pandemic, or really you kind of expanded during the pandemic. How have you leveraged some of these newer technologies and build a product where it has helped shorten your sales cycle? And just if you can talk about that.
Yeah, happy to. So the company is actually 17, but thank you.
Okay.
But I think to your point, the uptick from the use of technology, and actually very similar to the path that you were just sharing, is that the customer demand. So it was manual, right? And then it became the lookup, the due diligence, the relationship mapping became automated. But what we're seeing now, and you just mentioned this, is folks want to be told what to do, right? So I don't want computers to necessarily drive me, but the AI, the changes that's happening, it's not just telling me what's happened in the past, but it's actually telling me what to do in the future. So it's interesting because I've been around for a little while. When I started back in technology back in the 90s, we had this concept of exception management. And it's come much faster, right? And much more mature. And leveraging a lot of data points. I was sharing with somebody earlier today that I saw Michael Dell on MSNBC years ago, and he made a comment that we've only harnessed the power of 11% of the world's data. We're all sitting on it, and we've not figured out how to gain value out of it. In my industry, there's a big calling for the concept of digital twinning. And the whole idea here, nothing short of Minority Report, is to kind of say, okay, well, that's great. Here's my supply chain. Here's what's happening. Here are the things that go bump in the night, the cyber breaches, the company. But how do I have a digital representation of that and then get the computer to forward think based on pretty much actuarial science that says, if this thing happens, this is going to be the rolling impact to me. And that's where we're seeing major transformation and development from AI, where I don't, so much of my industry from a supply chain is really just business continuity, right? So it might be bad today to deal with this company, but tomorrow I have to because there's no other place. So Shell's a perfect example. I don't know if Shell's in the room, but they made a very public comment that they still had to continue to source from Russia, even though, with everything going on, but they couldn't find an alternative source of supply and they had to continue to deliver energy, and kudos to them for getting ahead of it. But the world needs to figure that out going forward. And so that's where we're seeing the big transformation and advancements of AI, is this digital twin is an electronic representation that allows me to make better informed decisions faster based on things that have happened.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I add one more thing? Right?
Yeah.
So I think you talk about supply chain. Supply chain is
a lot.
Supply chain is pretty huge for us. That is the biggest expense for us, right? And we have very complex supply chains because we are a global company with operations in about 54 countries. We are also part of, it's not just a commercial company, but we are also a defense company. That means we have to have same kind of regulations that we have to follow, like whether it's a Section 89, sure, export compliance, ITAR, or anything else. In all the supply chain, one of the huge challenge that we face and where we use AI quite a bit is like, where we are sourcing all this equipment from, what is the availability of it, right? What the supply chain health looks like, right? Yep. How the supplier quality is there, right? And all these complex decisions we are actually making using AI. And of course, one of the parameters of it is like, whether it is ITAR compliant, whether it's ER compliant, whether it is going to meet our Section 889 requirement that government mandates for us. And I think a lot of people do not know. I always take an example of toilet paper, right? Do you know toilet paper is also export compliant? Because US actually embargoed so many countries, and if you have to export toilet paper to North Korea, you cannot do it because you are not supposed to export it. And not too many people are aware of this actually export compliance requirement.
But Datta, I want to focus more on drones than toilet paper here, so maybe.
But everybody's
just taking that as an example.
Maybe, just going back to the example that you use, in terms of drones and how you have piloted that over the years, when are we going to see drones go mainstream, if you had to make a guess?
I think, I don't think it's a technology issue, because I think drones are there, people are using it quite a bit, right? I mean, as I said, we have flying taxi solution, right? We are doing a lot of piloting actually in New Zealand and others because the regulations allow us to basically do it, and not in US. So it's all up to the regulators, right, when they will allow the drones to fly.
So you think drones can do pretty much everything in terms of delivery use cases or delivering our packages or food or?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
I think the last mile, how to deliver in somebody's front yard or how to deliver in somebody's backyard, right? Those are the answers, whether somebody's there to basically check it, right? I think a lot of those areas we have solutions in place, right? I think at least definitely not in like places like San Francisco where like, or big cities where you are living in multi-story building and where to deliver the food, right? But at least other parts where you are living in a single family house and you can actually deliver in the front yard or backyard, the solutions are definitely available, and drones definitely can do those kind of jobs.
Yeah, got it. And Jennifer, I mean, when we think about supply chains, things keep getting, complicated, geopolitical tensions. Can your systems or the AI embedded in the systems help guide customers in terms of what they ought to be doing proactively in terms of dealing with some of these supply chain challenges that could come about?
So that's exactly how we use AI. And when I mentioned a moment ago around digital twinning, so the interesting thing about supply chains, for those of us that don't talk about it as much as I do, is the supply chain is actually a diamond shape. So I don't know if you've heard this, where we all source from the same couple companies, then there's a lot of fat in the middle between value-added resellers, distributors, whoever, and then we're all kind of sourcing from the same factories at the bottom. So the interesting thing about the conversations that are happening right now in the world, and we're all reading about, are we reshoring or nearshoring or whatever this is, if I just pull one of my direct suppliers and I find an alternative source, that fat part in the middle, I don't know if I changed that or not. So I may still be actually working with the exact same supplier base except for the top. And that's where AI comes in. And that's where the digital twin comes in, which is I'm able to talk about, I can actually visualize right? The extended relationships. So if I decide to make a change using data to make better informed decisions, if I decide to make a change, did I actually make a wholesale change to my supply chain? Am I actually compliant with different parts of the world? Am I actually funding the enemy in ways that I didn't know I was? We actually have this concept with our customers called supply chain washing. So you think about money laundering, right? Where if you're not paying attention, you may be inadvertently, right, allowing from nefarious actors into the money, the financial supply chain. Same thing's happening right now. If you don't have that transparency, if you're not leveraging technology and AI to make those decisions, how do you really know that you're making the right moves? And I think that's where the power, the no lag time, and just the sheer, to the point that you mentioned, the sheer amount of data that we actually really need to pay attention to. Because if you think about the supply chain, depending on how long it is, right, all those companies are doing their own thing because they're all incentivized to be profitable. And so whether they're doing it nefarious actions or just to stay profitable, you really don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know government and Congress is really focused on semiconductor supply chains, for example. Yes. And there is a clear dependency where a company like TSMC makes the leading edge chips that we don't have fab capacity. So like, how do you even help somebody diversify the supply chains when you know there are only a handful of suppliers? And it's a very complex supply chain because the way they source components is some of it goes from here, then they assemble stuff there, then it comes back here. So how do you deal with a complicated supply chain scenario like that? I mean, I just use that as an example.
You have less than 8 minutes left. So it's a really great question. And I think there's a lot of discussion right now around semiconductors, and a couple comments. One is, without transparency of the supply chain and without using AI to provide data very quickly and sensibly, you never really get a true picture of what's the problem you're trying to solve for. So the interesting thing about chips, and many people here are probably involved in the supply chain at some point, is that, and not just chips, but any supply chain, we got really lazy as a global economy. In that, back in the 90s, when we all started offshoring manufacturing, we were focused on leaning it out as a cost center and just in time. And we've all heard the joke, now we're focused on just in case. Yeah. And so I think that without getting that transparency, then I really never know if I'm solving the problem. I will also say, and this is not a PSA for government involvement in business, but it is where the government can add value. Because, and we're seeing it here in the States, we're seeing in the Five Eyes, they're starting to invest in some of these industries to create alternative sources of supply. Because you're exactly right, there are a certain amount of companies that make a certain amount of things. And if you think about your industry, there's only a certain amount of companies that have the certifications as well as the knowledge and access to the rare earth elements or whatever that is. And so you're dealing with a finite number of companies and resources, and I think that that's where the government can actually be helpful.
Got it. I know I have limited time. If there are any audience questions, I see one with supply chain. Over the last decades, just-in-time has been a huge driver, but it also makes sense. It makes the arena so brittle. How do you access the data needed to make the right decisions, and how do you know which data to analyze? I don't know who wants to take that. Yeah.
Did you want to?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, for me. So, because it's about supply chain.
Exactly.
So it actually does go back to a little bit of what you shared a few minutes ago, is that there is a lot of data out there in the world. And you really just, if I look at what the definition of supply chain really is, it's really just business continuity. I have to bring something in to get something out to make money, right? And so what we've done, I can talk for Interos and I can talk for our customer base, is that we've provided a lens of how to define risk in the supply chain, and it's multi-factor, and you were talking about this. So it's the financial viability of the company, it's the cyber posture of the company, it's sustainability posture, it's the geopolitical risk. There's a specific framework that has to be repeatable and scalable, and data has to support it. The interesting thing is that, and you were talking about working in different parts of the world, not every country either has that data available, it hasn't been created, or makes it available due to data suppression rights. And so great question. I think it's all about finding a model that works for your industry, where you're operating, what part of the world, because there's different laws and regulations, and then making sure that it actually honors the culture and the value of your business, because that actually, believe it or not, has an impact to the supply chain as well.
Yes.
Got it. So, Datta, just going back to how this will evolve. I mean, maybe you can kind of tell from your lens, what are the assumptions you are making in terms of how this wave of AI and automation is going to play out 2 to 5 years down the line, or even longer term?
Sure. I think so. Currently, if you look at it, right, because of pandemic, a lot of people started digitizing. I mean, IoT has been there for a long period of time. We have been capturing huge amount of data, but we're not really taking advantage of data. Even today also, as you said it correctly, there's a huge amount of data, but we are not taking full advantage of it. So what we are doing it in our industry right now, right? If you look at currently, like, you are flying commercial airline, right? So, or any airline, so which is basically 95% of the time it is basically on autopilot, right? Only 5% of the time pilot is making that change. We talk about flying taxis. It's completely unmanned autonomous flying taxis which are coming, right? Not unmanned, it is going to take people, but there's no pilot basically, right? So same stuff which is happening right now and across, it's like autopilot in the automobile industry, right? So all these industries are coming. So we think, I think a lot of that innovation which is happening, and we are going to take advantage of all the data that we are sitting around and basically utilizing that data and basically making decisions of that data. So a lot more innovation definitely happening in that area.
Got it. And Jennifer, I'm guessing we are not going back to just in time. So what is the new paradigm going to look like when it comes to supply chains?
So I think it's alternative sources. It really is. And I think, the interesting thing, you talk about innovation, there's a lot of innovation happening, right? You have a lot of 3D manufacturing occurring. And that's exciting, to be honest with you. I also think what's really interesting from a business standpoint, our businesses are literally being graded by their customer based on the health of the supply chain. And so I would offer that kind of brand loyalty is gone. It's now, think about what just happened with baby formula, right? And the stories with the mothers going to 11 different stores to try to figure out if they can actually just feed the baby. Now it's like, what's in front of me? But it's also, how did it get in front of me? And so a lot of the future of the game of the supply chain is alternative sources, but ethical sourcing. Because you're seeing that as a competitive edge. You're seeing that from a hiring standpoint. Employees only want to be working for companies that are doing things ethically, that are going to not harm the planet. And it's a weird world, because years ago, I mean, supply chain was not sexy, right? And my mother never knew what I did for a living until the last couple of years. But now it's become a CEO and board level conversation. Yeah. And it's not going to change.
Yeah. So we'll end up with an audience question. In your opinion, what are the biggest unrealized productivity gains for companies by automating processes in supply chain and operations? A lot of questions for you, Jennifer.
I've been doing a lot of talking.
So the way I look at it, right? So if you look at IoT and others, IoT, we talk about Internet of Things, right? So we are moving from IoT to AOT. We are talking about not Internet of Things, but we are talking about intelligence of things, right? How do we make it intelligence decisions by using the data, right? That is the direction we are going. And really the question is about, supply chain automation and in operation. Operations, we talk about, like, I mean, a lot more, with all the remote workforce and everything, we are basically talking, providing touch-free support to all our employees, right? We are making a lot of those decisions with this one. Supply chain also, we are looking at health of our supply chains, like what the supply quality looks like. We are making all those decisions by using AI. Yeah. I mean, I can talk a lot more. I know you just have 7 seconds remaining.
That's fine. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Jennifer and Datta, thank you so much for being here in person, and thank you all for listening in.